Alright, good morning once again to everyone. So we'll make a start now. So what are we doing today? Today we're going to be starting chapter 1.7. Last week we'll have completed chapter 1.6, which talks about system software. We looked at the different examples and the functions of that system software. So today we'll be looking at data processing. Now, when it comes to the part of your computer that handles processing, does anyone remember what part of the computer handles processing?
The CPU.
Very good. The CPU. So the CPU is the hardware parts of your computer that handles processing. And in addition to your CPU, your operating system also does some processing. It's because remember we talked about last week how your operating system is controlling all the hardware, controlling software. So it's doing some sort of processing also. So what we're going to be looking at today is how do they process data? What are the different methods of processing data? Whether it's your CPU, whether it's your operating system, how do they process data? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 ways of processing data that we're going to be looking at today. 1, batch processing. 2, time sharing. And we have 3 and 4 here. Online processing and real-time processing. So those are the 4 ways they can process data that we're going to look at. And then we're going to finally finish off with how is data transferred. So let's see. To get us started with the first paragraph and what is batch processing. Let's see. I'm going to start from the top. Amelina, could you read for us?
Sir, from batch processing,
From the very top.
data must be processed by the most suitable means. It can then be transferred to one or more computer systems for more processing, for output, or for storage. Batch processing. A batch processing system is one where data is collected together in a batch before processing starts. Batch processing is most suitable for tasks where a large amount of data is processed on a regular basis. When a batch job begins, it will continue until it is completed or until an error occurs.
All right, thank you. You could pause there. Ariel, could you read the last paragraph for us?
Examples of batch processing systems include those that process utility bills such as water and electricity, payroll systems, and examination report cards. Credit card companies also process billing in batches. The customer does not receive a bill for each separate credit card purchase, but one monthly bill for that month's purchase. The bill is created through batch processing, where all the data is collected and held until the bill is processed as a batch at the end of the billing cycle.
Great. So the first paragraph mentions that the data must be processed by the most suitable means. So if you guys can remember the IPOS cycle, IPOS What does that stand for?
Input, processing, IP. Input, processing, output, storage.
Very good. Input, processing, output, and storage. So we're looking at this processing part here. How does the CPU, how does the operating system, how do they process its data? So we're going to process the data and we're going to choose the most suitable way of processing that data. So one method of processing that data is called batch processing. Now, what is batch processing? Batch processing is basically when you collect data in a batch or when you group data together and you process that grouped data as one. So why do we use batch processing? We use it when we have large amounts of data to be processed. So we have this example here of a billing system, a credit card system. So normally, if a person makes a purchase, they do not get the for a credit card system, they do not get the bill for every purchase. If they made a purchase today is Monday or Tuesday. They made a purchase today on Tuesday, they make a purchase on Friday, they make a purchase on Sunday, and then a couple other days next week. They don't get a bill for each on each day. The company doesn't send out a bill for each day that they would have made a purchase. Rather, they are going to group all of that data. They're going to group all of those purchases into one monthly bill. So by grouping all of that data together, they're going to process it as one large piece of data. And after they finish processing it, they're going to send it out as one bill, basically, instead of sending out multiple small bills. So once again, what is batch processing? It is when we collect data together in a batch, when we group data together. Why are we grouping data together? Because when we have large amounts of data, batch processing is more beneficial. Now, another important point to take note of is that when you start a batch processing, when does it end? We have two ways that it can end. Batch processing is going to continue until it is completed. So if it finished processing everything, it's going to stop. So going back to the example with all the bills that person would have made purchases for. Each purchase is going to be processed. Each day is going to be processed. Each transaction is going to be processed. And when they finish processing everything for the month, say for example December, we already finished with December. You're going to process everything for December, and when it's finished, then you're going to get the final output. But sometimes when they are processing that month, maybe they come across an error. Maybe the system doesn't recognize one of the values. They don't recognize a store that they would have made a purchase, or the transaction did not complete on that day. So the processing goes into an error. So it stops the batch processing there. So when you start a batch process, it's either going to complete the entire batch or it's going to stop because it came across an error. So what are some other examples of batch processing? So remember, we're looking at grouping a lot of data and then processing all of that data. So your utility bills, your water bill, your electricity bill, do you guys get those bills on a daily basis?
No, sir.
No, you don't get those bills on a daily basis. You don't get your water bill, your electricity, your internet bill on a daily basis. Because if you think about it, does that make sense? Would that make logical sense for you to know how much water you're using every day, how much electricity you're using every day?
No, sir.
No, it doesn't make practical sense. So that is why, in some cases, batch processing is the more suitable method. That's a more suitable method of processing data because when it's not effective to process the data right away, you could group it together. And when you group it together, then it makes more sense. Then it's going to have more impact. For example, when a person sees that they're using maybe what, if your water bill is what, like 5,000 a month, and then so maybe every day you're using like what, $300 in water. So when you see that every day you gotta pay $300 to GWI to cover that, it might get annoying to some persons. That every day they gotta go to GWI just to pay that one $300. Whereas they could group all of those $300 together and comes up to whatever total 5,000, 6,000, and they pay that one standard amount for the entire month. So in that case there, grouping the data, putting it into batch is going to be more effective. So it's important to remember these examples that you're going to use batch processing for. Most utility bills, water, electricity, payroll systems. Do persons get paid daily?
No, sir.
No. But only those persons who might be working as laborers or so on, they might be getting paid daily. But persons who are working for the government, they're not going to be paid daily. They're going to have their monthly payment. So the same also. And even though a person is paid monthly, his payment is also being calculated daily. So the business or the organization, they would look at it as a daily payment and then transact it now into monthly. So that's why when a person is sick or when something happens, they can know to be able to say that how they can compensate them for the day because they know how much that person is supposed to be paid for that day. So payroll systems, a person gets paid every month. That day uses batch processing. Your report card, report system, that there also uses batch processing. And we talked about the billing systems and so on. So are you guys clear as to how batch processing works?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Now, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of batch processing? Balkasoon, could you read that for us?
Yes, sir. Advantages. Once the data is submitted for processing, the computer may be left running without human interaction. Jobs can be scheduled for a time when the computer is not busy. Disadvantage. There is always a delay before work is processed and returned since batch jobs are usually stored up over a period of time.
Great. So, advantage. Once the data is submitted for processing, the computer may be left running without human interaction. So the computer can run without human interaction. So you can set up the computer and you can say that it's going to accept these monthly input, these daily input. Whenever a person makes a transaction, whenever this person goes to make a purchase, just accept the input. And when you reach maybe a certain amount or a certain time, carry out the processing of all of that data. So that there could be when batch processing is carried out. Batch processing could be carried out either at a specific time or a specific amount. So a specific time, you could say maybe at the end of the month, the last day in the month, in every month, calculate all of the data, process all of the data. So that there would be time when the data is carried out, processed. Now, what about amount? For amount, you could say when the data reaches a certain amount. For example, um, the billing system. You could say when this person makes 30 transaction, this person makes 30 transaction, process all of our data. So this one could be at the end of the month, that's the time, end of month, and amount could be, for example, 30 transactions. So when you reach a certain specific time, the data is going to be processed, or when it reaches a certain amount of input, that's when it's going to process the data. So that means the computer has to wait to accept all of these input. It has to be waiting all the time. So all the time throughout the month, it's going to be waiting. From the 1st to the 29th, it's going to be waiting. It's going to be taking in all of this information. And you're going to tell the computer now, when this specific time or this specific amount reaches, process the data. So you don't have to go and keep checking on the computer to see if it reaches the amount or if it reaches a specific time and then tell it process it now. No, you can set up the system so that it does not have to operate with you. It knows when to carry out that processing. So that's one advantage there. The next advantage, you can schedule the jobs for when the computer is not busy. So remember, the computer is going to be taking in data. It's going to be taking in the information throughout the month. And at that time when it's taking in data, it's not processing anything. It's not doing anything with the data. It's just collecting. Because remember, it's going to collect in a batch. So at some point in time, the computer is basically going to be doing nothing. So you can tell the computer at those times to do other tasks. So you can use the computer basically for something else. So when the computer is not carrying out the batch processing, you can tell it maybe to process some other data in the meantime. So say for instance, this here is the batch processing over here. Then you can give the computer another task. Maybe say for instance, you could play a game on the computer. We're just going to use that as an example. Because when you're going to do the batch processing, here on the right hand side, when you're going to do this batch processing, it's going to take up all of the CPU power of the computer. So process all of this data. It's going to use up all the resources, process the data. So at this time, you won't want to play any games, basically. You won't want to use the computer for anything else, because that's going to slow down the batch processing. But when the computer was collecting data all the time, from the 1st to the 29th, or from 1 to 29 transactions, you can use it because it's not processing that batch of data. So that's when you could go on, you can play your game, you can maybe do some photo editing, video editing, whatever the case may be. You can schedule other jobs when it is not doing that batch processing. Are you guys clear on those two advantages here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now the disadvantage. So there's always a delay before the work is processed. And we talked about that. There's always this delay. And that delay is because is either a certain amount of time that is collecting the data or the certain amount that it has to wait on. So there's always that delay before you can get the work processed. In return, since batch jobs are usually stored up over a period of time. So that's the only disadvantage there basically, that you have to wait in order to get the data processed. If it doesn't reach this certain time or certain amount, sometimes you might not be able to know what is the processed data. So for example, using the your GPL as an example, using GPL as an example, they have to wait to process your data. So sometime, say for instance, this is the end of November, they're gonna finish processing your bill. They know that how you have to pay what 6,000, but at the end of December is when they're gonna process your bill again. So that time between there, they might not know how much you have to pay. So maybe at the 12th of December, because remember you have to wait until the 29th or the very end of the month to process. At the 12th of December, they might not know how much electricity you would have used so far, because the system is only gonna start at this specific time over here. So there's a delay before work gets started, and you might not know basically what the data is at, or you would not know anything about the data until the processing starts. So that there is the disadvantage of batch processing. You basically have to wait until that period of time in order for you to see the data. All right, so that there is batch processing. Those are the advantages, those are the disadvantages there. So next we're going to move on to time sharing, the second method of processing. So let's see, up to Darshana, you're going to read up to time, and Dante is going to continue to read in there. Or you can read that all. Darshana, could you read for us? Time sharing.
Okay, sir. Time sharing. A time sharing system allows many users to share time on a single computer. Each user is given a slice of CPU time by the computer. The computer works so fast that each user seems to be the sole user of the computer. One example of a time-sharing system is a bank's bank card system, which allows hundreds of people to access the same program on the mainframe at the same time.
Very good. Dante, could you continue reading?
Other operating system. I read from the right.
Yes.
Other operating system controls include multitasking, allowing more than one program to run or work at the same time, for example, using a desktop publishing program while a graphic program is still running. Multiprocessing, executing programs using two or more processors simultaneous.
Okay.
Multi-programming, executing two or more programs at the same time using only one processor. Multi-user, allowing more than one user on a computer network to access the same file at the same time.
Great.
I may not know how to spell.
It's fine. I can still hear you. So, time sharing. What is time sharing? Time sharing, as the name indicates, is where your computer, it shares basically the time it takes to process data. So, time sharing is when you share the time on a single computer. So, for example, you might have a laptop, you might have a single desktop in your home. Time sharing is when you can share that single system. Either multiple programs can use that same system, or multiple persons can use that same system. That is called time sharing. Using a single system, and either multiple programs or multiple persons are going to use the system at the same time. Now, how can they use the system at the same time? Well, the CPU, it is so powerful that it can basically divide itself. And it could say, give me a second, let me try this. Yes, so the CPU, where's my pen? Yes. The CPU, so this here is the CPU, and CPU. Now the CPU now can divide itself. So for instance, it could divide itself maybe into four parts, and it could be something like you could see that how, for example, if it's dividing itself for software, Paint could use this part of the CPU. Chrome could use this part over here. What else do we have? OBS could use this part over here. Excel could use this part over here. So the CPU can divide itself and say that oh, these persons can use these parts, basically. And the CPU is actually going to work so fast that it seems as though it actually divided itself. But in actuality, it actually didn't divide itself. But in some cases, it can divide itself. But that's basically the idea here. That the CPU can share its time with different programs, different persons, and it makes it seem as though that it's actually dividing itself, whereby sometimes it's just processing the data so fast that it appears as that way. So what is an example of time sharing? So we have the example of a system, a bank card system. So hundreds of people access this one system, this one program on the mainframe at the same time. So when you go to Republic Bank or any one of those banks, they are going to have a large computer system. So they're going to have a mainframe. So this is called a mainframe. And it's a very large computer that is going to hold the software that the company is going to use. It's going to have the banking software. And each person that you would see inside the bank is going to have a computer that connects to this mainframe, like this here. So when you see somebody standing up next to a computer, they would have that computer connected to this mainframe here. So they're sharing the access to this program, to this banking software that is on the mainframe. So hundreds of persons are going to be connected to this mainframe and using the system there to access that software. So that there is an example of time sharing. So how does your operating system know? How does your operating system carry out time sharing? Well, we have four methods here, and I'm sure you guys heard some of these terms already. Multitasking. So on your computer, what is referred to as multitasking? That is when you have more than one programs running on your computer. So if you notice at the bottom here, I have multiple programs running. I have Edge, I have Chrome, I have OBS, File Explorer. I can even open Excel. So I have multiple programs running on my system. So that there is called multitasking, when you have multiple programs running on the same system at the same time. Now, what is multi-processing? So, going back to multitasking, remember we're talking about time sharing. So, all of these programs are sharing the time or sharing the CPU of this one computer, of my one laptop that I have here. All of these programs here. So that there is time sharing. Now, what is multiprocessing now? The second one. Multiprocessing is when you have two or more processors. So you have multiple processors. Multiprocessing, multiple processors. So the programs on your computer now can have access to these multiple programs and they can run at the same time. So multitasking is gonna have when you have one system and all of your programs are running on this one system. So Paint, Chrome, Excel, and so on. Any other program that you would have, they would all run on this system here. Now, multiprocessing is when you're going to have multiple CPUs. So this is the system, this is the motherboard, and this is CPU 1, this is CPU 2, CPU 1, CPU 2, and inside of it, you can have Paint over here, and you can have Chrome over here. Excel could be over here, and OBS could be over here. So that is the difference between multitasking, everything on one system, whereas multiprocessing uses the same system, but the same system has multiple CPU inside of it. Are you guys following so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. Now, the third, multi-programming, executing two or more programs at the same time, but it's using only one processor. So this is actually in relation to multitasking. So it's kind of like multitasking. I'm not trying to say the same. It's kind of like multitasking. So you're gonna only have one CPU. You're gonna only have one CPU, and all of your programs are going to be run on that one CPU there. So that is multi-programming, one processor running more than one program. So multi-programming, multiple programs running on one processor. And lastly, we have multi-user, multiple users. So you're gonna have multiple users accessing the same file. So that's like the example of that mainframe setup. So the mainframe setup, you have multiple users, user 1, user 2, user 3, and then you're going to have multiple more of them, and they're going to have access to this one system there. You're going to have access to the same file, so over the network. So there's going to be a network. So this line here represents the network connecting to this single mainframe computer, and there could be a file on this mainframe. For example, say for example Excel file that is on this mainframe computer, and all of these persons here can access that one Excel file. That there is multi-user. Alright, so are you guys clear on time sharing and how your operating system functions to carry out time sharing? Anyone with any questions?
No, sir, no, sir.
Alright. So we're gonna move on to the next two processing methods, data processing methods, online and real time. So they're two different processing method, but they're kind of related to each other. So Fazil, you can read the first paragraph, and then Gabriel. Next one.
Computers and peripheral devices are online when they are connected to a main processor and turned on so that the operator can interact with them. Printers are online, for example, when they are ready to receive data from the computer to print. Most printers have an online button you can press to turn the machine on. If it is turned off when you were offline, you can also be online if you're connected to, say, the internet through a modem or network.
Very good. Alright, great. Next paragraph, Gabrielle.
A real-time processing system processes data without significant delay, making it always up to date. Since the processing system must be connected to one or more computers to process data, then it must also be online. However, note that online does not necessarily imply that processing is in real time, since there may be some delay with an online system. Examples of real-time processing systems include airplane landing control systems, electronic fund transfer systems, and ticket reservation systems.
Great. So, as you guys just heard from the reading of the paragraph, we have a case where one can be another, but at the same time, the other cannot be the other one. So, that's what I'm going to try to explain now. So, firstly, what is online processing? Online processing is basically when a device is connected to the system, it is connected to the CPU, it's connected to the computer, and it is turned on. That's basically what it means. The device is connected and it is on. So for example, your printer. You connect your printer to the computer and you turn on your printer. So the fact that your printer is on and your printer is connected to the computer so that you can actually print something, that is called online processing. Are you guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Good. So even when you're connected to the internet, so remember, we mentioned that we have to be connected to a computer, connected to a processor here. So you don't only have to be connected to a computer, a processor. You can also be connected online in that you are on the internet. So the fact that you're connected to the internet and you're connected to other devices, you're connected to the internet and you're communicating means that your device is online. So that's all it basically means, that you're online. Your device is on and it is connected. So we have the example of your printer being on, and you're able to print from that printer. Now, what is the difference between online and real time? Real time could be contrast with batch processing. Remember, with batch processing, we have to wait to process the data. We have to wait a specific time. We have to wait a specific amount. Well, with real time, you do not have to wait. You process the data without significant delay. Basically, as soon as you get the data, you process the data. So it's like the opposite of batch processing. You do not have to wait on a specific time. You do not have to wait on a specific amount. So if you think about it, remember we started in the beginning, we have these different ways of processing data, and which is more suitable. When we have to process data, we have to choose which is more suitable. So if we think back to the billing system, your electricity bill, excuse me, what do it use? Yes. So choosing the most suitable processing, data processing, a billing system, looking at your electricity bill. We already said that it doesn't make sense to get your bill every day. So if you were to get your bill every day, you would have to use a real-time processing system. Because what that is going to do is that when the information comes in for that day, it processes it. When it comes in the next day, it processes it. It comes in the other day, it processes it. It doesn't even have to wait a day. Every second the data comes in, it's going to process that data right away. So imagine if you use a real-time system for your water bill. Then every second or every minute you would be getting a bill saying that how you have to pay $5, you gotta pay $10, you gotta pay $20 for using this amount of water. So that there would not be practical. It would not be suitable for that type of data. So that is why a batch processing would be more suitable. But there are some cases where you would want to process your data without delay. You would want to process it right away. So examples of system that process data right away is going to include airplane landing control system. Now imagine you're flying a plane and you need to land the plane, and the plane is using a batch processing system, and you want to know if it's safe to land the plane. Do you have to wait? Would it make sense to pile up a set of planes in the sky and say when 5 planes are in the sky, then process the data to know whether you can land the plane or not? No, that's not practical. Planes cannot stay up in the sky just like that for long periods of time. So batch processing is not going to be suitable there. You need something to process the data right away with minimum time. So an airplane landing control system, they need that data, that process data right away. Electronic fund transfer system. Imagine you're at the bank and your parents are taking out money out of the bank so that they can buy something for you. And imagine if the bank is using a batch processing system. Now, you would have to wait on a specific time for your parent to get their money, for the bank to process that. you would have to wait on a specific amount of persons maybe, and then they process your transaction. That there would not be suitable. You want your money right away. Your parents want their money right away. So having a real-time system is going to be more suitable to get your money right away. Take the reservation system so that once again you reserve your ticket, you reserve your seat, and it gets processed right away. First come, first serve. Whoever accesses the system first, they make the reservation, they get the reservation first, they get the tickets first. So the difference between the two, online and real time. So when you're online, it basically means the device is on. And when you're real time, it basically means that you are processing the data without delay. There's no delay. You can process the data without delay. So online means the device is on. Real time means the you're processing without delay. Now here's a question. In order for you to process data, does the device need to be on or off? That should be a simple question.
Sir, on?
On. Can you do anything with your device if it's off?
No, sir.
No, it's that simple. So, in order for you to process in real time, your device has to be on. So, a device that is real time processing is also online processing. You guys get that?
Yes, sir.
Once it's real time, it's also online because in order for you to process the data, in the first place you have to be on. Now, in contrast to that, now, if the device is off or if the device is online, that does not necessarily mean it is real time. That does not mean it is real time. So if the device is an online device, that doesn't mean it's a real time device. For example, your printer. Your printer, it works differently depending on what you're going to send to print it. But the fact that your printer is on does not mean it is real time. So yes, there might be some delay, but and in some cases they might print right away. So like if you send a lot of documents to your printer, that's gonna build up and it's gonna take some time to print that information off of the printer. So it is not real time. So you don't get the information right away out of it. You have to wait. So if a device is real time, it is going to be online because the device must be on in order for you to process data. But if a device is online, that does not mean it is real time. It doesn't mean it's going to process the data right away. There could be some delay. Are you guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, good. All right. Alright, so what are the advantages and disadvantages of real time and online? So the advantage, there's no delay. As you mentioned, there is no delay. You don't have to wait on anything. You don't have to wait on a specific time. You don't have to wait on a specific amount. You can just go ahead, process the data. The other advantage is that the data is up to date. So you know every second, every minute, what value the data is going to be at. So you don't have to wait until the end of the month or a specific amount to know what stage the data is at. What's the value of the data? What's the calculation of the data? You don't have to wait. You can always get that information up to date. And what is the disadvantage now? The computer must be dedicated to solely to the task. So you can only use the computer for real time. So remember we talked about the batch processing. Let me see if I still have that. No. Was it somewhere else? Yeah. Remember we talked about batch processing, that period of time that you're going to be waiting. So so this is the starting point, and this is going to be collecting the data. You're collecting the data here, and this is where you're going to process the data in the batch. So all of this time here in batch processing, you are waiting. And when the system is waiting, you can do something else. You can maybe play a game, or you can do some picture editing, graphic editing, video editing, whatever the case may be with the system. But with a real-time system now, it is going to be processing all the time. So something like this here is going to be processing all the time. So there is no waiting period. So the system is working all the time, constantly all the time working. So you can't just go and use the system when it's just idle and use it for something else, because it's constantly working. And the next disadvantage is that the system must be online all the time, because if it's not online, then it won't be able to process any data. So imagine an airplane landings control system that has to be online 24/7. Otherwise, planes will be crashing. They'll be crash landing. They will not know if it's safe to land or not, if it's safe to take off or not, whatever the case may be. So all real-time systems have to be online all the time. All right, so let's wrap up this last few paragraphs here, and then we're gonna close off for today. So we're gonna look at what is data transfer and how data moves in your system. So Jonathan, could you read this paragraph here for us? Jonathan, are you there? Katrina?
Data transfer. Most computer users will at some time or another need to transfer files between computers. School students may need to transfer their work from a computer at home to the school network via cloud-based storage. By using a secondary storage device such as a flash memory stick, or by emailing the work to themselves to retrieve when they are at school. Uploading data involves transferring data from your computer to another computer on the network or the internet, while downloading involves receiving data to your computer from another computer on the network or the internet. Updates to software packages, such as Microsoft Office, are downloaded from the internet using File Transfer Protocol (FTP).
Very good. So you have three terms here that you should remember. Don't cut off there. You have uploading, you have downloading, and you have FTP, file transfer protocol. Now, I'm sure you guys know already know what is uploading and downloading, but just in case for some persons who may not, we're going to use the simple example of WhatsApp. So, uploading is when you transfer data to another device, from your device to another. So, when you send a picture to one of your friends, when you send a document, once you're transferring something from your device to another person's device, that is called uploading. Now, once you are receiving, that is called downloading. So, when your friend sends you a picture now, or when you go on the internet and you download a picture or you download a video, you are receiving data. You are downloading that data. Now, what facilitates the transfer of uploading and downloading? That is this FTP protocol, File Transfer Protocol. This helps us to transfer, to upload, and to download our data. Now the last two paragraphs, Liancia, could you read for us? Smith?
Start from before transferring data.
Yes.
Before transferring data, it is also sometimes necessary to reduce the file size. The process of reducing the size of a file for storage or for sending via the internet is known as file compression. WinZip and WinRAR are popular programs for compressing files. They can also be used to group files together into a single file for easier transmission. File compression is important because some files can take up a large amount of disk storage space. The larger the file size, the longer it takes to send via the internet. Users of the internet will also know that the web pages containing pictures can take a long time to load. Some popular file formats give smaller file sizes than others because they are compressed file type.
Very good. So have any of you ever compressed a file before? No one?
Yes, sir.
Alright, you good? So what happened to that file when you compressed it?
Sir, split up into like small files.
Okay, good. Well, could depend on which part of it, aspect of it you're talking about. So, file compression. This is another term that you guys should remember. What is file compression? File compression is the process of reducing the size of a file for storage, or even for sending that file, for transferring that file. Basically, you are reducing the size of the file. That is file compression. We have two software here, WinZip and WinRAR. So please remember those two examples. Now, file compression also allows you to group files together. So say for instance you have 10 pictures. Instead of sending all 10 pictures individually, you can group it into a single file, and that will be easier to send over the internet. That's also why persons use file compression. Now, have any of you ever noticed, I'm sure you've noticed it, that when you upload pictures and videos to WhatsApp, what happens to it?
Takes time to load it, I guess.
Takes time to load? That's what you said?
Yes, sir.
Alright.
So it gets sent in one single file.
Good. But what happens to the quality? When you upload a picture or a video, what happens to the quality?
Sir, it gets lower in
It gets
quality.
lowered. Any idea as to why?
Sir, I don't know, but probably because the device or the application can't take the pixels it has. Because like some things have a 180 pixel and it could carry it down to a 480.
Good, good. So it's something along that line. Now, so it's not that WhatsApp don't like y'all. It's actually for the better experience when you're using the application, when you're using the service. Now, large files, please take note of this. Large files take longer to send over the internet, and I'm sure you guys know this. If you have a 3-minute video and you have a 10-minute video, I'm sure you guys know that the 10-minute video is going to be larger and that's going to take longer to send. So the larger the file, the longer it's going to take to send over the internet. Now that is why companies, organizations, businesses, what they're going to do, especially social media, what they're going to do is that they're going to compress what you try to send. They're going to compress your pictures, they're going to compress your videos without you even asking, and you don't have a choice because they want your data to send as quickly as possible. So they compress your data, your picture and your video, so that it is smaller and it will be able to send. So every time you upload a picture to Facebook, to Instagram, to WhatsApp, they're actually being compressed and their file size is being reduced. That is why they look as though their quality was reduced because they were compressed. So whether it's a picture, whether it's a video, these social media companies, they compress it all so that they can transfer your data. Now, when your data is compressed, the last part here, when your data is compressed, it has different file formats for those compression. So file types is the same as file compression. The different file types is after you would have compressed the file, you get different file types. So when you compress a picture or a graphic, you're going to get a file type or a file compression of JPEG. This is one example. Joint Photographic Experts Group, a common image file. Or you can get a PNG, Portable Network Graphic, image file once again. When you compress music, you get a compression file of MP3. When you compress video, one example is MPEG and MPEG version 4. So those common file types that you guys know about, JPEG, MP3, 3GP, and those different file types, they are actually different file compression. They're different methods of file compression. So have any of you ever heard about the video format 3GP?
No, sir.
No? Alright. Well, let me not go into that. Because if any of you ever come across it, you would actually notice that 3GP is smaller than MP4. So persons that have smaller storage, they might actually go for 3GP videos than MP4 because that would have a smaller storage capacity there. Alright, so we've wrapped up chapters 1.7. We have quite a few information here. Once again, I'm going to create this as a quiz, so you're going to see it in your future. I hope you guys complete the one that I posted yesterday. So in review, we have different ways of processing data. And each method of processing data is suitable based on different requirements. So we have batch processing, which groups data into a batch and then you process the data. You have time sharing, which shares a single system with multiple programs or multiple persons. You have online and real time. Online basically means the device is on, it's turned on, or it's connected to the internet. Real time, it means as it get the data, it processes it right away. It doesn't wait like batch processing. So it's the opposite of batch processing. Then we looked at what is uploading, what is downloading, what is FTP, what is file compression, and what are the different file types. So if you guys don't have any questions on anything we looked at today, this is going to be the end of today's class. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Same to you, sir.